Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of the T-film and its interaction with contact lenses. My name is Hidesh and I'm joined with Judy. So you've heard our introduction in part 1, but I'll do a quick recap on the next slide. I lead the education for the J&J Vision Care team. I'm an optometrist who have graduated from University of Auckland and I've also done a Master of Optometry at UNSW. I've been really fortunate to have a lot of different commercial roles throughout my career, learning consultant, contact lens buyer, professional services, and now in education. Hand over to you, Judy, to do your introduction.
Hi, so I'm Judy Kwan. I'm a consultant for Johnson & Johnson, still an optometrist practicing in practice today. And my secondary role is also being a university supervisor for the final year graduate students at University of New South Wales. My background does include research, which is where my passion from contact lenses actually stems from. So let's review what we did during Module 1.
So Module 1, we looked at the different components of the tear film. We understand that there's 3 distinct layers. However, the mucus, the mucin, and the aqueous can be seen as one by some researchers. We know that it's very complex and they have very specific roles. We also looked at the interaction between the moist, moist material with our tear film, understanding that the aqueous layer has a lot of different proteins, and the most abundant one, lysozyme, which deals with keeping the tear film clean because of its bactericidal activity. How moist is able to keep it in its active form, so it doesn't allow it to denature, and that's really important. We are now going to switch gears and look at a different material. We're going to look at beta in a bit more detail, and we're also going to talk a little bit about astigmatism as well. What is ESD and how we can improve outcomes for patients as well.
So let's explore the lipid layer in a little bit more detail.
So as alluded to before, all of the different components of the tear film has a very critical role. And essentially with the lipid layer, the main work that it does is maintain lubrication and hydration of the ocular surface. And that leads to prevention of evaporation, as well as helping, when you blink, it allows it to move all over, right? So very, very important. So it is a very important part of the tear film, and it also, a similar analogy can be thought about is we want the components of the tear film to be in its active form. So let's talk about how does the Vita product work. So Acuvue Vita is a monthly lens, and it has a specific technology called hydromet technology. The lens itself is non-coated, and it is designed differently. It is the scientific name being Cinefilcon C. So we've taken an existing contact lens material, Cinefilcon A, in our family, and we've modified it. And we've maximized the amount of hydrating agent within the lens. And we've also created a lens that can work really harmoniously with the lipid layer. So what it does, it allows the lipid layer to be optimally distributed throughout the lens, and it integrates with it as well. And what is the outcome of doing these two things, of maximizing the hydrating agent as well as maintaining the lipid layer and an optimal density that's throughout the lens? It leads to very reliable, very much tested and tried with patients that say it is superior comfort that is present all month long. So let me tell you a little bit about the hydrating agent itself, right? So the hydrating agent is something called PVP, and I always have a hard time pronouncing it. So Judy, would you mind telling us what it is?
Sure, it is polyvinyl pyrrolidone.
See, polyvinyl pyrrolidone. Yeah, there we go. So PVP, what's the function? It serves 2 key purposes. First of all, it allows moisture retention, and the second, it allows integration of the tear film components. Now, right early on in the first part of the conversation, when we talked about part 1, how when you put a physical contact lens that splits the tear film into 2, that in itself is a challenge to the tear film in terms of maintaining its function. So PVP, because of its mucin-like properties, really helps to, in my mind, stabilize the tear film to allow better outcomes. And our PVP is different than other manufacturers. Ours are long chain, and in the pure form, there can be different types. And we're really happy that the type that we use serves a really important function for the contact lens itself. So now that you know a little bit about the hydrating agent, it's mucin-like, it stabilizes the tear film. Let me talk to you a little bit about the second part, about how we're able to maintain lipids. So what you can see in front of you, there's 4 different types of contact lens materials that we're sort of testing against each other. And diagrammatically, what you're seeing is Optics Aqua has a plasma coat. The other 3 lenses, Biofinity, Ultra, and AccuView Beta, don't. All of them have some level of integration of lipids, and you can see they're distributed. However, the main difference with Beta versus the other lenses is the amount of lipids that it's able to hold within the material itself that it's able to integrate. It's quite high. In fact, it's twice as much as the others. Why is that important? Well, similar to how we talked about how the moist material was able to keep the protein lysozyme from being denatured. Similarly, AccuView Beta, the lens matrix is such that it allows the lipids to float in and out in such a way, whilst it's integrated in the material, it's less likely to be oxidized or denatured because it's not at the surface. It's not interacting with other elements. And because of that, what happens is you've got more lipids that's actually doing its job in its natural state. Again, the distinction being it's integrated, they're not depositing. And that in itself is one of the mechanisms of why the actual comfort of the lens is so good. So number one, if you have more lipids, it simply means you will have less evaporation. In fact, when we have done our lab testing, we found that we have 33% less evaporation versus the other lenses. So it's lab tested and found to be true. The other point that I'd like to talk about is the fact that we've tested it with patients. So not only in the lab, we've actually taken it and put it on patients' eyes. And you know, this is a study where the patients were blinded to what they were wearing, and there was a crossover as well. And so what essentially happened is you can see from week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, the 4 different starting points of the different lenses. You can see that what Beta ended up at as a comfort level at 69% far exceeds what the other fresh lenses that you'd find at week 1 at the highest of 57%. So not only does it outperform the other lenses at week 1, it is the comfort levels that you find with this product at week 4 far exceeds the competitor lens at week 1. So it's the patients telling us the overall comfort is really, really good throughout the month. So if that's not the only bonus, not only is the comfort there, but it is the only monthly lens with a class 1 UV block in place as well. So, you know, it's a win-win scenario. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Judy, to talk a little bit about astigmatism.
Yeah, so let's delve a little bit deeper in terms of astigmatism. Now, in terms of the opportunity, we know that there are actually 47% of our population that have astigmatism greater than or equal to 0.75 diopters, and at least one eye. However, if we look at the sales attributed to astigmatic contact lenses, we're only prescribing about 19%. So there's actually a big opportunity to prescribe more astigmatism contact lenses to allow patients to potentially see even better and experience the world in a much friendlier and happier, get a happier visual experience from that. So I've talked about the opportunity to prescribe astigmatism, but if we have a look at the reasons why we potentially may not be prescribing contact lenses that have astigmatism, it seems to be that our patients aren't actually aware that they have astigmatism, or that they have lenses that are available to them that could potentially correct their astigmatism. So this is where we can potentially allow our patients to know a little bit more about their prescription to fill that potential gap that we have been able to find. Now, in terms of correction of astigmatism, on this example on the side on the left here, this is an example of what our patients may be experiencing if we were to correct their astigmatism being 0.75. So if we were to say, for example, this is a -2, -0.75 astigmatic patient, this is the type of vision that they would be able to gain if we were to fully correct them. Now, if we were to provide our patient with a spherical equivalent for that prescription, so be it -225 sphere only, this is the type of vision that they would experience. And as you can see here, yes, they're able to see the 20/20 line. However, the clarity is suboptimal. So as you can see, there's a lot of shadowing behind each letter. And yes, they probably would be guessing that particular line when we're measuring their visual acuity. So this is an example, a simulation of what their visual may maybe see, what they may be seeing if we were to suboptimally correct them and mask our patients. Now we know that when we mask our patient, many studies have found that the impact can actually be quite significant. Be it that they're complaining that their digital device or usage with digital device is not as comfortable, reading speed is significantly reduced, and driving performance in terms of tactical driving performance is also reduced. So this is where we really need to think about the lifestyle that our patient actually requires. So say, for example, if you have a lawyer and they require reading all the time, if we were to suboptimally correct them and mask them, this is where their job could potentially be impacted and their lifestyle could potentially be impacted as well. So this is where I'd really like you to consider the prescription of the astigmatic component within the contact lens as well. So please avoid the masking to provide better visual lifestyle to your patients. Now, I often hear that when we fit toric contact lenses, it can be a bit of a challenge as well for not only the practitioner, but also for our patients. Because some of our astigmatic designs can actually cause rotation of the contact lens when they move their head or when they move their eye. In fact, up to 30 degrees rotation is what has been reported in literature. Now, when the contact lens does destabilize and move because of the head and eye posture, what our patients may then end up doing is they may end up rubbing their eyes or blinking really hard to get their vision back into being clear for them. So this is what we would classify as compensating behaviors because of the fact that their toric contact lens is not working appropriately for their needs. Now this is quite challenging for not only the practitioner to try and fix, but also for the patient. So looking at it from the practitioner side for both you and I, for you and for myself, our researchers have looked at the different lens designs that are currently on the market for when we talk about toric contact lenses. And as you can see here, there are many different designs based on the manufacturer that you end up choosing. We have our traditional prism ballast designs, where it's thickest and heaviest at the bottom at the 6 o'clock mark. We have our peri-ballast designs, where the thickest regions would be roughly about 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, with potentially some eyelid interaction in both of these designs. And we have our AccuView eyelid stabilized design, where thickness is actually minimized at the bottom to avoid that lower eyelid interaction. So these are the 3 different toric astigmatic designs that are currently on the market. Now, as I've mentioned, our AccuView design is eyelid stabilized. And what that potentially means is we have 4 stabilization zones that work with the eyelid on the blink to rotate the lens into position. Because it is utilizing the blink, and because there is no thick portion at the bottom, the thickness profile across the center of the lens is actually quite uniform, which results in no prism effect across the optic zone. We will elaborate a little bit further on this prismatic effect that is noticed in other contact lenses. What is also great about the eyelid stabilized design in the AccuView lenses is because it's utilizing the blink, it actually orientates and stabilizes really quickly when we first put the contact lenses into our patient's eyes. So you don't really require that full 10 minutes of stabilization. In terms of the AccuView performance, we will delve a little bit deeper in terms of how quickly it settles in the next few slides. Finally, because we are utilizing the blink, stabilizes quickly, orientates quickly, and the eyelid holds it in place, our patients are able to achieve clear and stable vision throughout the day, even with those head and eye movements. So I mentioned prismatic effect across the optic zone of contact lenses. And what is interesting is an independent research company actually measured the thickness profile across many different types of toric lenses and calculated how much prism would be going through these particular toric lenses. And what they discovered was actually quite alarming in some instances. What they did discover was the traditional prism ballast designs actually could end up having about 1 diopter of prism base down over that in that contact lens. So our patients could be potentially looking through 1 diopter of prism base down through that eye. And so when you think about our monocular astigmatic patients, so those patients who are wearing a sphere in one eye and a toric in the other, this is where having unintentionally induced 1 prism base down in their eye between the 2 eyes could actually lead to some symptoms such as potentially feeling that it's not quite right in their vision, or even double vision in some cases. So this is where I'd really like you to think about how much prism we are prescribing in our patients' eyes, especially for those patients who have a sphere in one eye and a toric in the other eye. Are they feeling that discomfort because of the prism, or are they feeling the discomfort because of the design? And we know that in terms of our spectacle lenses, we only really, well, ideally, we don't want any prism, unintentional prism in their glasses. So this is where I think having the ability, knowing that certain contact lenses have different prismatic effects, can actually help us troubleshoot some of those symptoms that our patients are describing to us when they're wearing toric contact lenses. So remember, please consider your monocular astigmats because of the prism effect that potentially may come in play. Now, the second aspect, as I mentioned earlier on, head and eye movements can actually contribute to approximately 30 degrees of rotation. And if we look at this particular study where they actually asked their participants to turn their head or move their head to a different position, and then they measured how much the contact lens would rotate. As you can see here, some lenses did rotate greater than 35 degrees. And assuringly, our AccuView contact lens, because of the eyelid stabilized design, because it uses the blink and the eyelid to keep it stable, it didn't rotate as much when we put our head to the side. In fact, it was half as much as the other lenses, which actually equated to providing our patients with half a line better in vision. So in terms of our AccuView branded contact lenses for astigmatism, it's actually very reassuring to know that both the spherical lenses and the astigmatic lenses can actually help provide some sort of correction for nearly 96% of all our patients within our database. It's also very interesting to note that fitting an astigmatic contact lens is actually very similar in timing to our spherical contact lenses in our AccuView brand. So I often hear from our students that, fitting an astigmatic contact lens may potentially take more time. And what we have found in AccuView is it actually takes just about the same amount of time to fit a spherical contact lens. And it may potentially be because of our design. So having known that particular statistic, our AccuView brand contact lenses for astigmatism is actually very easy to fit. And as I said earlier, the time it takes to fit our AccuView astigmatism contact lens is very similar to our spherical lenses. in terms of success, we are able to successfully fit 93% of our contact lens, whereas in astigmatism correction, it settles within 3 minutes or less in 97% of our cases. So 3 minutes or less, most likely attributed to our eyelid stabilized design. And in terms of vision, able to get over better than or equal to 6/6 vision in 94% of the cases that were fitted. And if we were to ask optometrists, I mean, I know that it's very easy to fit an AccuView branded contact lenses. But if we were to ask ordinary optometrists or opticians how they would rate our AccuView lenses for astigmatism, 9 out of 10 would actually say it's very easy to fit. So that's actually very empowering to know that it is easy to fit an astigmatic contact lens and it won't take as much time as you think. Now, in terms of that, Hadesh, did you have any additional comments in terms of potentially maybe even practice management in terms of the timing and the performance of the astigmatism lenses?
Thank you, Judy. Working in a corporate environment, there's always some level of, I suppose, downward pressure to be efficient with our time. So I think we're all thinking, maybe 2 to 3 minutes doesn't sound a lot, but when you have 10, 15, 20 patients during the day, that adds up really, really quickly. So that equates to a couple, 1 to 2 appointment time. It's also the difference between, managing your time to write referrals, following up other cases, or finishing up for the day as well. So every minute saved is actually useful, not only in the contact lens space, but overarchingly in practice efficiency as well. So whether you're in corporate setting, independent, I can't see a reason not to have something that makes efficiency better, especially from a patient point of view as well. I think they wouldn't want to spend too long, especially in the current climate. If there is concern of being in a practice for a long time, we want to be making sure that we're choosing the right products, giving the option to choose, but also making the appointment as quick and painless as possible. Would you agree?
And less returns as well for aftercares. We don't like patients complaining about it feeling uncomfortable or whatnot and requiring that aftercare to be refitted.
Absolutely. So I think for me, understanding 10 plus years ago, when astigmatism lenses or astigmatic lenses were not as perfect or as good as it is today, we've come a long way with different iterations. So I would suggest that, give it a go. Maybe you've had a bad experience previously. However, explaining our science and why the AccuView brand is different in terms of the ESD design, have a go. And I suppose, what do you have to lose? In fact, you have a lot to gain with chair time and getting happier patients.
Definitely.
So I think this is a good time to recap what we've gone through part 1 and part 2. So first of all, if we start with just the philosophy in terms of our R&D team, we talk about how we're able to bring how the eye works, the different elements of the eye, and how we're able to integrate it into our products. So in terms of the actual moisture infused for hydration, that is something that we really are alluding to the PVP molecule that is built into our Vita material that's helping maximize the amount of hydration. In terms of the invisible edge, that's really related to the edge design or the profile of our AccuView materials. It's thin and tapered, and that in itself is a mechanical reason for comfort. The third point being UV block. We have the highest UV block in the daily as well as a monthly space. And I guess when you have patients, when you have 2 options which are just as good, even asking the question, would you like a contact lens with or without UV block, it can make a significant difference in terms of how they perceive. I know that a lot of patients aren't aware that we provide UV block contact lenses, and they might be willing to pay more for the premium product as well. And again, as healthcare practitioners, we don't want to only solve needs now. We also want to take care of eyes for the mid to long term as well, due to the cumulative damage of UV. Now, of course, this does not replace sunglasses. We almost see this as a great conversation to start around the different ways you can protect yourself. Sunglasses and contact lenses, they really work as good partners in crime, I should say. And last but not least,
sorry, Hadesh. I actually really like your analogy about the moisturizers. Like, in terms of if we were to be offered a moisturizer with UV or without, we would definitely go with the one with the UV.
And even better, our moisturizer or our UV block doesn't fade over time, right? Because sometimes that's another question is, oh, does the UV block go away? With a monthly lens, no, it's the same amount of UV on day dot till the end of the month. Whereas with moisturizers, as you know, you have to reapply with the UV block, especially if you're out in the beach because the sun breaks it down. Thank you, Judy, for that. I like using analogies with patients just to keep things simple, not to sort of give them too much of the technical, because that's our job as professionals to learn all the technical, but I suppose we want to make it really easy for patients to understand. And you've done a fantastic job, Judy, really explaining eyelid stabilized design. It's different. It doesn't induce prism. It helps with those cases, not only when you have an astig eye and a spherical eye, but generally speaking, right, it helps with lower lid interaction. And for the patient, it's symmetrical. You can't put it the wrong way around. And also less rotation. So the consistency of vision is there as well. So it's a great design. And I would suggest that, you know, this potentially is your first pick or a great troubleshooter. It works in both ways. So let's go on to the tear film itself. Now, again, just a really quick summary. It is a highly complex fluid. It wants to be in homeostasis. There's challenges to the eye, whether you're sleeping or going under different environments where it's trying to get back to normal. It has a very, significant roles in vision, comfort, and health of the eye. So nutrition, making sure you are not irritated and you can see well. Any disruption of the tear film, not only the overarching tear film itself, but any subcomponents of it, it's not great, right? It's how we're now defining dry eye, whether it's inflammation or just the loss of homeostasis, right? So it's very, very important that we work harmoniously with. And so for that point, if we move on to the next slide, I would like to ask that you consider, really have a scientific detective, be like Sherlock Holmes, consider the quality of the tear film of the patient. And once you kind of have a deep understanding of what's happening at the ocular surface, should make it easier to choose a product that is actually based on your patient's needs. And really to summarize that, right, it is using a more scientific approach and also understanding the contact lens materials that are out there. Choose something that will help to integrate and leverage the natural function of the tear film rather than repel or work against. So hopefully on the next slide here that's coming up, we have shown you that with the Oasis type material, we have PVP. That's also true of Vita. It does have PVP as well, and that helps with the hydration conversation. With Moist, it's very specific for lysozyme, and lysozyme, remembering that it is something that helps to keep the eyes clean, bactericidal, and so it doesn't allow it to denature. It really works with it. And with Vita, not only do you have the PVP component, but the material is arranged in such a manner that it's able to integrate beneficial lipids in such a way that you've got twice the amount of density integrated. That means 33% less evaporation, which means better comfort, not only in the first week, but throughout the whole month in itself. So the different materials of, I would argue, whether it's silicone hydrogel or hydrogel, understanding it intimately can help understand how you can troubleshoot and solve your patient's needs as well. So with that, I'm gonna thank you. And Judy, do you have any final words before we end part 2?
No, yeah, you've summed it up really nicely. Just evaluate your patient's tear film, and knowing what the material does can help us troubleshoot some of the symptoms and problems that our patients may be experiencing. Very great summary.
Excellent. Well, guys, we've crammed a lot in, 2 half-an-hour sessions. I'm sure you may have some questions. Feel free to reach out to myself, and I'll be more than happy to walk you through in any of the questions, help that answer for you as well. Do be aware that J&J, we hold webinars for the profession. And if you are interested in any other topic, you can check that out and we'll be able to update you on our portfolio. Thank you so much. Have a great clinical conference, guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.